Here we go. It's another edition of the Smart Driving Cars podcast, and once again, we have a great guest in store. We appreciate you listening or watching and hope you and your families are staying healthy. This edition is sponsored by the Smart ETFs, Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. For more information, head to motoetf.com. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with the Faculty Chair of Autonomous Vehicle Engineering at Princeton University, Alan Kornhauser. Good to see you, Alan.
Nice to be back.
And joining us in this edition, Alex Roy is back with us. Alex is the founder and host of the No Parking Podcast. There's much, much more to the bio, but we'll leave it there for the moment. Alex, thanks for being with us again.
It's always fun to see both you guys. Hi, Fred. Hi, Alan.
Yeah. Hi, Alex. Great having you.
Alex, we had you on with us just a few short months ago. I think it was early February. Anything new going on in the world?
Well, what's the line? It's like, 10 years pass, nothing happens. A week happens, 10 years. And it's like, time is a bit of a blur. I remember actually 3 months ago, a friend of mine sent me some videos from China of people being like welded into like apartment buildings and their doors welded shut and streets being like fumigated, like in Wuhan. And I immediately went out and started buying. It's like mid-February, started buying groceries and thinking something weird's going to happen. And started thinking about how that's going to affect transportation. And here we are.
Did you buy toilet paper? Are you the guy that got all the toilet? Whatever. Who would have thought toilet paper was going to be the commodity? Don't people have rags and water?
Alan,
my mother grew up in communist East Germany and taught me to be very frugal with certain things. Among those things was toilet paper. So no, I did not stock up on toilet paper.
Let's start out here. First off, among your titles is Director of Special Operations at Argo AI, a self-driving technology platform that Ford has invested $1 billion in. VW has also invested there. What can you tell us about the impact of all this there?
Well, I think I think the biggest thing is that this has accelerated, and coronavirus has accelerated the consolidation of companies in the transportation sector. For many years, there was probably too many companies claiming to be developing autonomous vehicle technology. And then a lot of the folks left those companies, and we had the ride-hail companies, and a lot of people left those companies and started mobility, scooter startups. And suddenly you see, under great pressure, everybody has to justify the money they've raised and the development paths. And I think it's becoming really apparent that beyond the technological hurdles to build autonomous vehicles, you have to build a business around the technology. It doesn't matter. And my friend Brian Selesky is the CEO of Argo. He often says this, that if you can't scale it, if you can't build a business around it, it just doesn't matter. And whenever we talk about this behind closed doors, and I try to explain to people why business model matters, because there's still people out there who think that's, growth is everything, even if you're losing money. If you could build an autonomous vehicle like Knight Rider, like the 2000, if you could build one, why would you only build one and lend it to one guy? It makes no sense. If you could build an autonomous vehicle and improve safety and potentially build a profitable business, of course you would. And so suddenly we're seeing everybody. I think in the last few days, was it Bird or Lime, Bird, one of these scooter companies, their valuation imploded because they could never build a business around scooter rentals. And you're going to see a lot more consolidation in the sector. I have always said that there probably should only be 4 or 5 autonomous vehicle companies in the world. When I say companies, I mean companies building the actual stack. And they'll, like Morgan Stanley said years ago, there'll probably only be, 5 or 6 car companies in the world. And logically, the autonomous vehicle companies will align with a few manufacturers, and then you will see the business models fight it out. Because eventually the technology will reach maturity. It's the business models that have to justify themselves, not the technology.
I absolutely agree. Now, coming from an academic institution and academia, all we ever needed to do was to put books on shelves, or get peer-reviewed publications, and we didn't care about whether or not we were building a business or whatever. But in fact, you're absolutely right. And in fact, the value of this thing doesn't get captured unless you build a business. If we're not providing mobility to people that they want to use and pay for, then what are we doing? I mean, my goodness. I mean, and to me, that this has been really the driver for me is the fact that I look at these things as mobility machines. That's what I call them, because they're out there. They're gizmos. Just what are they good for? Moving things and people.
Right.
And why would you want to do anything else? And why would you want to own one for yourself, as you point out, and have it sit in the driveway 90 whatever percent of the time, and so on? These things are out there. They just want to work. They just want to do stuff. They just want to move. That's the beauty.
I will confess to you that there was a time where I didn't entirely buy into the small delivery bot concept. There's some companies out there, friends of mine have invested in these companies. Starship is one of these.
Starship.
And I didn't get it, because as a New Yorker, the notion of a bot driving by, going on the sidewalk in New York City, carrying anything of value, even though I consider myself a good person, my natural instinct is to kick it over and take what's inside, even if I don't need it. That's just and I think I'm a good person. So you can imagine what some other people would do to that thing. And so, but suddenly I see the value of these delivery bots. Now, the fact that coronavirus and many of the places where delivery bots would make sense now are closed. So like a college campus. I mean, Brad Templeton, I watched you guys talking last week. The fact that a delivery bot on a college campus would be great, and that's not to be. But if there were delivery bots like right now where I am, I would love it. It'd be great. And it's a great thought experiment would be, what if coronavirus had landed 5 or 7 years later? What would it look? What would that look like with the first real deployments of autonomous vehicles, or what might have been mitigated in terms of delivery for food and medicine and other items? So when people, and I've heard some people suggest that because the sharing component of autonomous vehicles assumptions about sharing may change because of consumer behavior in an age of coronavirus, that the sharing component of business models for autonomous vehicles may not play out the way investors hope. Actually, I would argue something completely different. The Wright brothers, I love using this one. When the Wright brothers, they flew the first prototypes. They didn't go very far, and it wasn't that many years after that. And Zeppelins were all the rage. In fact, the Empire State Building was built with recesses for Zeppelin docking. And you had the Great Depression and the stock market crash in 1929, and there were people who said back then, 50 feet, those planes suck. Zeppelins are everything. Great Depression, there will never be businesses built around affordable air travel. And yet, 100 years later, it's inconceivable that aircraft would not exist, that businesses wouldn't exist around aircraft, and blimps are gone. Zeppelins just don't exist for us. Now, coronavirus is going to reboot a lot of assumptions around how to build a profitable airline or even aircraft manufacturer. But the technology is not going to go away. It's the business around it will be adapted to the realities of the consumer environment. And that's true of autonomous vehicles. In a way, the autonomous vehicle industry is lucky that this is happening now and not in 5 or 10 years, where massive deployments with vehicles with very specific hardware types operating in specific domains would find the demand gone. there's an opportunity now to adapt to the realities on the ground before mass deployments arrive, and make the first big deployments successful.
So let's talk a little bit more about the shared business, because of course, to me, sharing is the key with this, because that's where the real environmental values, the economic values, the value, the affordability aspect of it. But the sharing really it's not big sharing, it's sharing 2 or 3 or 4. I mean, if you get an average vehicle occupancy serving 2 trip makers in these things, all of a sudden, what's it cost you for a vehicle? 50 cents a mile. Basically, you're down to 25 cents a trip mile. Can't we just make compartments in these things? You know, you have doors on each one. You don't need, it's not as if we're going to load up a subway train. This isn't for Manhattan, okay? For every place except for Manhattan, what you're talking about in the shared economy is that 40% of the trips will only have 1 person in it. But, you know, another 25% will have 2, another 10 or 15% will have 3, another 6-passenger vehicle, you know, 3 doors, you get in your each compartment. If you really want a compartment, you can put, you know, if these things are not going to be nothing but basically electric skateboards that you plop, you know, the compartment in, and then it takes you to wherever you want. You can have compartments and still have sharing. You can separate if that's really important. If we haven't gotten the shot and whatever, and we've become immune to all this, and we get back to hugging each other and whatever, as we love to do, you know, what do you think about all that?
Well, look, first of all, it's not for me to comment on the design of vehicles that have not yet been revealed.
Please don't. Oh, we don't want that. We don't want any of that.
But you know, for the companies, this is going to be an easier problem for the companies that have not yet shown their release vehicles. But you know, we're still a couple of years away from deployment. I'm absolutely confident that there will be certainly a vaccine for the coronavirus, so 19, probably before we see mass deployment of autonomous vehicles from the big companies. Maybe, well, Waymo is already out there. And between now and then, I anticipate you'll see, you know, antimicrobial surfaces. You'll see consistent fleet cleaning. This, by the way, brings up an interesting point. If you want to have a robotaxi fleet that's commercially viable, certainly in any near to medium term, you want the fleet to be run by a fleet operator.
Absolutely.
That either has, you know, the ability logistically to clean the vehicles and maintain the vehicles and make sure that they're cleaned and made as often as necessary. Which is something, say, believers in a Tesla robotaxi fleet have not considered. Because you're not going to privately owned. I mean, I have a Tesla and I love it, but you know, in no universe would I want to get into a peer-to-peer shared Tesla robotaxi fleet if I don't know who the owner is and when the last time that thing was cleaned.
And you don't know who maintained it. And what I know you're a responsible guy, but I'm not a responsible guy. I'm going to put this. No, that can't happen. That's
cleaning is going to be solvable. And the shared look, humans, we are a social species. It's in our nature. It's biological. We are social. This is not the 28 days later virus. Okay, this will be solved. Medical science exists and is always improving. So this will be solved, and the world's going to change. Culture will change, but people wanting to be social and be together in many places, including vehicles, is going to persist.
Yeah, we're not going to need a Darwinian type of transformation. Take 7 billion people that have been social animals, and now through Darwinian whatever, we all of a sudden become antisocial and complete distancing. My goodness, I mean,
it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense, does it?
If anything, and we're not here to talk about the media.
Yeah.
The media, you know, the business models are based on the greatest controversy and the biggest upset and tension. But human nature is also quite good. We're a communal species, so that will return.
Alex, any thoughts about what Ford announced in the last couple of weeks, slowing things down in terms of their autonomous efforts? And I think it was a delay of about a year they're talking about.
I think it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense in a way. The big news is the silence of the other companies that have not, that we're going to miss their deadlines and haven't had to say anything.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, Cruise just got saved because they canceled their launch date and never announced one. So I totally support Ford's decision. I think it was wise. I'm a big believer in bluntness and honesty. My father's advice for life was bad news first, or just tell the truth. And so, good on Ford. I'm glad to be part of that.
Yeah, I think that was also a very good decision. It certainly doesn't hurt. 1 year delay. My goodness, the most important thing that we have to do is we have to do it well. When we put it out there, it has to work. We can't be killing Elaine Herzbergs. Okay, we can't do that. That is devastating. So a little bit more time for people, guys and gals, to write code, which guess what? In this environment, those folks are, my students are like, they're generating, codes coming out. Whoa, can you imagine the improvement? You can now do a whole version change, because you're not trying to get something. Hey, let's take time. Let's leapfrog the whole damn thing. Let's not go boom. Hey, I look at this as a positive aspect of all this, because in fact, where you stumble is in the beginning points. Where you make your mistakes is in the beginning points, and giving a little bit more time so that the pressure's not on there to get out there too early is in fact a benefit. But I'm a half full guy, so as opposed to go ahead.
I never thought in a million years I'd ever work for an autonomous vehicle company ever. It's just not, and I was
that's not your DNA.
I was self-employed my whole life. I was in media. I was an investor. But my first attraction to Argo was that when there's a guy named Eric Paul Dennis. Have you heard of this guy?
Yeah.
He's a transportation smart guy. He does a timeline of all the autonomous vehicle companies going back years with the deadlines, target dates, and had all the companies that missed their dates. He updates it every month. And maybe the only company whose target launch date was like years out and had not missed was Argo. And so that was my first introduction to who Argo was and what their approach is. But, the big lesson, and I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this, of the coronavirus kind of work from home and the lockdowns has been that my commute time, which would be anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour each day in each direction, has been replaced by work time. People keep saying autonomous vehicles give you your time back to do whatever you want. But anecdotally, almost everyone I know is just taking that time and just adding more work hours. And I don't know if that's a function of, wanting to keep their jobs like in this current environment, or if it's just that our natural inclination is to default to work. Maybe were I younger, my inclination would be default to Xbox. But I think there's a lot of anthropological work to be done about what we've learned from the work from home time.
A lot of people don't work. They actually do something that they love to do and want to do. Okay.
Well, in my case,
they aren't like you, like me. Okay. I claim I've never worked. Okay.
Lucky.
Because I've had the good fortune of doing stuff that I want to do. Guess what? If you have more time, guess what you want to do?
More of
stuff that you want to do. Guess what?
I've been.
Oh my goodness!
I've been eating this.
Yeah, well, there is a problem about being home and there being a refrigerator downstairs. Whoa! I mean,
collateral damage from
collateral
COVID-19.
damage. But this morning, for the 11th day in a row, I ran 3 miles. So anyway, but I'm
better than me.
Whatever.
I have a question for you guys. You had, among the bullet points you sent me, one that I wanted to make sure we talked about, which was how coronavirus is affecting the airlines and how people was it you, Alan, who brought up that people prefer to drive distances under 500 miles?
Yeah, I've repeated that, and I put that in there. And in fact, I had a student who did his senior thesis, and another one this year, basically look at sort of short haul mobility aspects, and really there's not good data out there to prove it, because we really don't know. We don't monitor really well how far people really drive and when they drive long distances. But even before the virus, most people were driving, under 500 miles as opposed to flying. Who flew? Those that had the money, those that had somebody else paying for them, and so on. When you start looking at at post 2011, the 9/11, with the headache that air travel had to go through. In other words, the time you have to go to the airport, the taking off of your shoes, the crap that you have to put up with, the delays at Newark, for example, and whatever, and so on and so forth. All of a sudden, you do the trade-off. I mean, you can drive it almost as fast as you can fly it. And if it's not a coming back and forth, and you're going to have your car with you, there's an enormous propensity. And in fact, the trade-off is you're better off driving it.
Especially if it's a trip like you're saying, to New York area, to Washington, or New York area to Boston, something like that. I mean, if you figure out the time you've got to be at the airport an hour early and all that hassle.
Plus and all that stuff. So in a sense, it's not been good. And then now all of a sudden, now people say, oh, I'm in my own car and doing it. If you have your own car, you're not going to go to Newark. You're not going to go to Philadelphia. You're not going to go to Easton. You're not going to go to Atlantic City. You're not going to go to Trenton. The regional airports are going to get killed, except they may all of a sudden pick up air freight.
Interesting.
So the question is there a pivot opportunity for them to participate more in air freight in terms of the whole logistics business going on? Of course, you have Amazon. Amazon's all in they've done the FedEx model of the super hub, bringing in super hub and all that sort of thing. They're in Cincinnati or in Kentucky, but Cincinnati Airport. But there is an opportunity, but short haul, why would you deal with the damn airlines? The airlines are
you can say it.
They're gonna be in trouble. Well, look, what is Gatwick gonna close? I mean, what ValueJet just pulled out of Gatwick or something like that, and another one's talking about pulling out of Gatwick.
Yeah,
what happens in Europe?
I've been driving New York to Pittsburgh every other week for the last year or so. It's 370 miles door to door.
Yeah,
hour and a half flight, and but it's more like 5 hours if I have to fly to get to the airport.
Well, for you, that's like a 3-hour drive, right?
Not true. Yeah. I'm a father now. I'm almost 50, and I drive like an old lady. If you ask a girlfriend, she will tell you I drive like I'm 90 years old, and I'm so careful.
Look, I go to Pittsburgh every once in a while because I was raised in Pittsburgh. I'm a Steeler fan or whatever, and so on. Princeton to Pittsburgh, Princeton to Heinz Stadium, 5 hours. Okay, Pennsylvania Turnpike, no snow, with intelligent cruise control. Oh my goodness! And if I had a Tesla with Autopilot, I mean, there's no way I'm going to go to Philadelphia, Newark, and fly into Pittsburgh, and then have to go through the tunnel out of the airport to get to this. No way. Yeah. No way. I mean, it's not even close.
What's really criminal is that if you want to take a train from New York to Pittsburgh, I think it's like 11 hours.
And it shows up at Pittsburgh at 3:30 in the morning or something. I mean, wait, don't get me going on that one. I mean, look, I mean, what are you going to do? hey.
Did you guys see the Wired article about my friend Brian?
Yeah, I was going to mention
yes,
that. That's
yes, it was
very,
yeah.
very nice.
Have that in the next e-letter. Yeah, very nice article, and yeah, very well deserved, and you know, and it's very nice, absolutely.
Yeah, the title kind of says it all: the relentless startup fast-tracking Ford self-driving cars.
Because seriously, I've had these conversations with Brian over and over and over, and he always says the same thing. He says, you know, a pragmatic approach that, you know, does things methodically and correctly will get you to solutions. And among those things is, you know, get the cars to market using it with a business around it. And it eventually, and I said, Brian, does that eventually include that I could own a vehicle that has autonomy in it? He's like, Alex, you're just going to have to wait.
Yeah, well,
building a business requires the shared fleet operations, and eventually we'll solve the other problem down the line.
Right, but do you even want to own one that in fact really drives itself? You want to own one you're going to drive a little bit, but really, and are you really responsible enough of it? Of course you're responsible. I'm not responsible enough as an individual to send my vehicle out there to go pick up my kid at soccer practice and bring her home or something.
Let me tell you what I see. What I see is, I'm going to continue driving myself in my car from New York to Pittsburgh because trains are not going to improve in a reasonable time span. These fences of autonomous vehicles, shared fleets operating in cities will expand.
Yeah.
And eventually, a few generations down the road, there will be some subscription-based autonomy option for a privately owned vehicle. I think, and I've heard there's been talk about this. It's speculative at this point, but since the cost of the hardware and the software, if you were to buy the vehicle outright, would be prohibitive, and you also need upgrades over time. So I think there's a scenario where once you've amortized all the R&D into shared commercial fleets and urban centers, it may be possible to have a subscription to a geofenced autonomy option for, say, highways. You get city to city, the subscription, you pay it, the system works inside, the fence is the highway, and then at the other end, you either park your car, or if you want to enter the city, your car enters into a fleet managed kind of traffic system at the other urban center. But
Alex, if we get Ford Argo to come to Trenton and provide mobility service in Trenton, which and one of the things, go back to one of the things you said earlier about the little things, moving goods. If these things are providing value to the community, they will be respected by the community, and the community will protect them and respect them and not kick them over, as we were joking around. Okay, the respect of the community is really important, and if in fact Argo does come to Trenton, that respect, that's the thing that we're trying to actually build, the respect for the technology, because otherwise it's just so easy to throw a monkey wrench into it. Once that's there and it's operating there, there's no reason why the thing can't get onto the Pennsylvania Turnpike. And if Argo is also operating in Pittsburgh, there's no reason why I can't get off the turn and take me to Heinz Field. I can get into it. No, I mean, hey, these are mobility machines. Some of them can just be moving around, taking people 2 miles, whatever, around Trenton, but one can go out there, one can come back, and how whether or not you pay through a subscription service, you pay by the mile, it's free because of course it comes with something, whatever. Well, look, or you're selling advertising, who knows what. Look, I always people get tired of me using the elevator analogy, but the elevator analogy is, how much did you pay the last time you used an elevator in a building? Why? Well, nobody can charge any rent for any.
I pay for it indirectly, and it's pretty.
Yeah, of course you pay for it indirect. You pay for everything indirectly. Everything ends up getting. Although now I guess we're just printing this up, but never mind. if you're going to be able to charge any rent for that 14th floor, you've got to provide the mobility.
Right.
Why is this so different horizontally? Okay. Why
Perfect.
why have we evolved to a
Perfect
system where it says, hey, you got to bring your own and you pay for it, sucker. It's your responsibility. You do it. As opposed to, hey, I want accessibility out of my home. Part of my taxes, property taxes pays for that. If Hamilton Jewelers in Princeton wants me to go there to buy jewelry for my wife, hey, part of their taxes goes to, who knows what the payment mechanism's going to be.
Well,
okay.
I had a guest, more than one guest on the No Parking podcast. Gabe Klein was on.
Yeah.
Gabe Klein, who used to run Chicago and Washington DOT, and Jeffrey Tumlin, who now runs San Francisco MTA, and talking about public-private partnerships. So, as a lot of transit systems are underfunded or not optimally operated, that there would be, we speculated and we all agreed that there would be an increasing number of better integrated public-private partnerships that would bring autonomous vehicles and private mobility providers together with transit, interlocking. And so that, mobility as a service apps could give you much more accurate information as to multimodal trips, and that you might have some much more accurate predictions of, pickup and drop times. So, one of the side effects of the coronavirus is that some of these folks, like Jeffrey Tillman in San Francisco, are getting to experiment with different street patterns, street closures, improving lanes for bikes. And I think we'll probably see better mobility in general after coronavirus than we ever saw before. But the second point I'd like to make, earlier you were talking about respect. One of the biggest things that I'm always talking about with Brian is the need for people to trust autonomous vehicles, and that trust is not a number. I mean, yes, of course, you need numbers and metrics to make a safety case, but that we trust people whose actual skills we know nothing about to drive us places all the time, on faith that they're humans, we're humans, they want to live, therefore we will live. And yet these are not based in reality. And so trust is this ephemeral thing that can only be built through a combination of demonstration plus time and a human factor. I would never go to a restaurant where I knew that the chef never washed his hands.
Yeah.
I don't need to know what the ingredients are. The guy doesn't wash his hands. I don't want to eat what he's cooking.
Yeah.
And so this is, trust is a really essential part of building a technology, marketing it, and then deploying it. Because that last piece once it's broken, it's very hard to earn back for us.
Absolutely. And again, back to my elevator analogy. Hey, it's even automated and we trust it.
Did you see the
old
You ever see the old elevator? The pictures of Otis? Was it elevator
Otis?
demo?
I mean, what did Otis do? He was demonstrating the safety devices that would keep him, and he had to go out again to build that trust. And once the trust is built, even though some people still die in elevators, really, there are accidents. Don't tell anybody, but there are. You don't have to get to zero, okay?
Mark Rosekind, the former head of NHTSA, will tell you. And anyone in transportation or science will tell you that if you leave the house, the chances that something might happen are better than zero.
Yeah.
So the only question is how far away from zero is it?
No, right. And life's a risk. Life is a risk.
Yeah.
Life is fun. It would be, as we've said many times on this, life would be boring if it wasn't a risk, because there would be no excitement. Look, I don't even want to talk about the stuff that you've done where you claim there's no risk, and
you could not pay me to go skydiving, but I would get a car at almost any speed. There's another great quote from my friend Mark Rosekind. He says, "Listen, when it comes to safety, things go wrong. You can blame people, or you can have safety. Blaming people doesn't solve anything. But safety is always a moving target, and the target, hopefully, it's like risk has a half-life.
Yeah.
Science, engineering, and progress are always hacking away at it, but it's never zero. So how much better are we going to do tomorrow than today?
Well, if folks want to know what Alan was talking about, they can Google Alex Roy.
I'm retired. That never happened. I mean, what are you talking?
Yeah.
We'll continue in just a moment, but this is a good time to remind you about our sponsor, the Smart ETFs, Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. To get more info, head to motoetf.com. When you get to the website there, make sure that you read the white paper. It's titled The Smart Transportation Revolution at motoetf.com under the Insights and News tab. Great information there. It can help you make informed decisions. ETFs can be a great way to spread out that risk. not the same risk that we were talking about, but it's a great way. Check it out. Alan, getting back to some of the other headlines in the latest Smart Driving Car newsletter. Tesla making news once again, of course. Electric reporting that Tesla achieved record safety with Autopilot, a more than 50% improvement last quarter, one accident for every 4.68 million Autopilot miles driven. And they're saying the accident rate for those driving without Autopilot was 1.99 million miles, one accident. So,
well, first of all, they're not accidents; they're crashes. They're,
sorry.
But anyway, we won't get to what the definition of one is versus another, and so on. And darn it, I keep saying, I just wish that Tesla would release its data so that someone like me or somebody else can do an independent evaluation of the darn thing. One thing is for sure, though. Tesla is gathering information about how people drive, where they drive, what the safety is, what the performance is, whatever it is. Unbelievably high quality data. Okay, and as we're seeing with the current things that we're going through right now, if you have garbage into anything, you get nothing but garbage out, and data are key. I just wish that Tesla would just open it up and let people actually see so that in fact, if they say so, it's one thing. If an independent entity says so, I think it's another, and it would really benefit them. They should just open that darn thing up and say, look, this is what it is. Take all the privacy stuff out of there and so on and so forth. You can even put out the GPS tracks if you take out the beginnings and ends, because then you can't really tell where the person lives, and you can't tell where they went to work or where they went to. But the piece in between is 90% of it. Throw out the end. Please do that.
And send it to Professor Alan Kornhauser.
Yeah, no, hey, I'd love to look at it. Man, I got students, we go through. It's data that we never thought we could ever get.
And you're never going to get it, Professor. You know they never.
Damn it.
You're never going to get it. Listen, I drive the hell out of my Tesla, and I love it. But let me tell you, the predictable abuse that's going on here would just shut them down so fast. They're never going to release that. The thing, my beef here is this. Without knowing where these miles are collected, but we know Autopilot's primarily used on highways, but not exclusively.
Not exclusively.
Not exclusively. That the sample, we have no baseline. And
right.
So it doesn't. It's just Fox News had a chart a few weeks ago where coronavirus deaths, but it wasn't linear on one axis, and you don't need to be a statistician to look at that and say, that doesn't make sense. And so this is
we've been doing that the whole time through this thing. Yeah, I've been doing it. Terrible. My wife hates me.
Math and science are tough mistresses for people who don't want to get married to the truth.
Alex, you've had a firsthand look at some of the latest updates to Autopilot. So tell us what your impressions are.
So the latest OTA update offers red light and stop sign recognition. And I think it's supposed to stop the vehicle. I haven't actually tested that because I didn't want to. But let me say, for those who believe that I don't like Tesla, I've repeatedly said that I love my car, and I highly recommend it for anyone who wants an electric vehicle. Now, so I'm going to say something very good about my Tesla. I was recently approaching, in New Jersey, I was approaching a red light, and I was distracted. And the red light camera recognition warning went off. And it was the same loudness level and alert type as automatic emergency braking. It went off as if I was about to hit something. And And this is a safety feature that I had not encountered in any other vehicle. I almost went through a red, and it told me, and it warned me, and I hit the brakes. I don't know. I don't think I was in actual danger, but that is a great driver assistance safety feature. That's terrific.
Well, I think it should go farther. It shouldn't, if it thinks you should stop, it shouldn't just warn you, it should stop.
Of course.
I mean, if it's of course. Now, if people want to say, "Oh, the driver, he or she is sacrosanct. They know what the hell they're doing." We wouldn't. I mean, Society of Automotive Engineers says, "Do no harm to the poor driver." I mean, I hate those guys. But what?
They don't like me.
But we're gonna have to cut that. I shouldn't say that. No, I mean, come on. I mean, the whole damn industry has been built up against to put the driver as sacrosanct, and was afraid that, my goodness, if these systems are good, and they're good, they should warn you, but they should also stop, and they shouldn't wait to the last damn second and then have all hell break loose to stop you. They should slow you down. What are you going to lose? 3 seconds? I mean, cut it out.
Actually, I've been looking. I'm always looking at startups in driver assistance and autonomous vehicles, and there are a couple of guys out there. One company that I love, it's not a secret, Atom Cogtech. They're doing like a next generation driver monitoring system that does cognition prediction through eye tracking. And there's different approaches to this. But the one thing they do that I love, and I hope we see more of this, is they create an individual driver profile. So if your inputs on the brakes and steering over time are unsafe and or don't correlate to your cognition, like one-to-one, if your cognition correlates to good behavior or not, they have a profile for you. And if you are about to make a mistake, and the system will predict whether you're going to react or not to a crosswalk or a sign, it will or won't intervene or give you a warning. Because people have different behaviors while they're driving. Some people scan consistently, some people don't. Some people don't scan, and yet they have great reaction times. And some people do scan, and the reaction times are terrible. And so we need a lot more personalization around the human-machine interface if people are going to drive cars in the future at all. Otherwise, autonomous vehicles won't just make sense. They will justify themselves into ubiquity.
Yeah, well, I agree 100%. Yes, we are different, which is good. I mean, vive la différence. But and in fact, it should take these things into account. But it should really intervene. And I think that Tesla coming out with a red light and stop sign camera recognition piece is really good. I hope they figured out what to do if there's a stationary object in the lane ahead, and if figured that one that they can't pass under, because that's been absolutely terrible. But apparently that's been a little bit fixed, maybe.
The thing to me, which I find it's not funny, but I have a lot of friends who work in autonomous vehicle development at Argo and at other companies who own Teslas, and it is it's like a bizarro world where anybody believes that a Tesla next year is going to be capable of level 4 autonomy with a degree of safety that is necessary for people to trust them. Because if these things aren't recognizing stop signs with near 100% accuracy today, then they're not going to in 6 months or 12 months. This is, high definition maps with databases of things like red lights and stop signs are essential to deploying an autonomous vehicle that doesn't have anyone in the driver's seat or a steering wheel.
Ooh, I want to disagree with you on that one.
I'm baiting you, Alan.
I'm baiting you. No, well, the problem with the high definition maps is they only have the stationary objects. The key objects you're really trying to avoid from hitting when you're moving around are the moving objects. And so you've got to have your system really do well with the moving objects and the new objects that aren't there, or the objects that are standing still now but aren't in the high definition map, fire truck and lane ahead. Okay, so since you have to do that, you might as well do it all. Okay, so you can't you can't say to yourself, oh, does the map really have it? And therefore I've got to figure it out if it's there or not. Having the high definition information is in fact not a crutch.
Okay, so
maybe in fact the noose that you put around your neck and give you the shovel and dig the hole.
What problem? It depends, of course, what problem you want to solve. If you want to operate in a complex urban environment, and
suburban environment, Trenton, anything, I'm out in the woods. I don't care. Go ahead, keep going.
The use case for what you're doing is going to change a lot in terms of the kind of hardware and software you need. So if you're operating in a low complexity environment and you don't have a lot of pedestrians, you could potentially deploy a vehicle. I would not want to be responsible for building a safety case for that, but yes, one could do so. Whether you can get people to trust it is a different
No, look where Elaine Herzberg was crossing the street.
That was an entirely different problem.
No, it's not. It's a fundamental to the problem. You can't assume that there's not going to be a pedestrian.
No,
you have to find the pedestrian in your. This is what you do when you drive. Even in the Cannonball, you did it.
That's true, but did you actually? If you piece together what happened in that incident in Tempe, the Uber ATG vehicle had a crash. And I wrote a speculative article about it before I knew anything, guessing at what happened. That you had some real problems. They were actually human problems in terms of how the sensor fusion was managed. And that's very different from whether or not you have maps. Those problems would have existed with or without maps. That's organizational.
Yeah, but maps wouldn't have helped you.
No, maps would not have solved that.
We're going to skip over a few things, a couple of other topics we're going to.
I was actually just going to say that if you want an example of good autonomy, Knight Rider at scale. Bad autonomy, Car, which was Kit's enemy. You don't want that.
A couple of other quick headlines, Alan. Intel spending $1 billion to buy the urban transit startup Move It.
Do I really have to comment?
Yeah. I have a quick comment. Why don't you get this guy, Harry Campbell from the Rideshare guy? Yeah. Why don't you has he been on your show?
No.
Get him on the show because he had an interesting tweet the other day. He said, this all sounds great, nice and fine, yada, yada. And then he said on his Twitter, he doesn't know a single person in the United States who uses Move It.
Well, I guess that's the comment that I have in smart driving cars. They claim that 80 million people, 800 million people use Move It for transit information. I think that's a quote in it. I asked, my goodness, is there even 800 million people in the world that use transit, let alone use Move It to get whatever. I mean, and the unfortunate thing I guess I shouldn't say, but of course I'll say, Intel Capital was an investor in Move It. All of a sudden, Intel's now going to pay Intel Capital whatever a nice.
That's like a SoftBank WeWork type situation. Is that what you're
No, never mind. I don't know. Whatever. I just got myself in trouble.
Well, we've talked a little bit about Lyft and Uber earlier. Lyft announcing they're laying off 1,000 people. Looks like Uber's laying off more too. I guess it's no surprise in this environment.
Consolidation in the sector is coming. It's a long time coming. So.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have consolidation. Hey, look, transportation is fundamentally a utility. Okay. In fact, if we were a good, communist Marxist entity, we would have, one entity providing it for the benefit of all society and all that stuff. And the competition shouldn't be in there. But we're not, luckily. But that's what consolidation will bring. And of course, the other issue is with it, if you end up having to pay the driver a living wage and have them work working time span during the day, it can't be inexpensive.
Are you suggesting that California's new lawsuit against Uber and Lyft asking that they classify their workers as employees is a good thing?
No, I'm not saying it's a good, well, I'm saying it's a good thing for the employees because I think the employees need to have a living wage. I think people have to be able to feed their families. People shouldn't be slaves. They shouldn't be working for nothing. But all of a sudden, because of the labor costs associated with each one of those entities, and you now have to pay that living wage to that entity, you become a transit company. Well, what's the problem? Why are transit companies so unbelievably bankrupt? It's because, they pay their employees a living wage. And because they do, that the price has to be such that it's either unaffordable or it's subsidized in some way, and you can't get around that.
I have heard it said, and I think there's some merit to this, that Google, Uber, and Lyft have gathered such volumes of data about consumer behavior and location that their acquisition by companies trying to build profitable business in this sector might be a public good.
I don't know. I don't think so. I think that's easy to capture and so on by anybody. I don't think the fundamental data and the knowledge of that really helps. I think what you want is a system that can respond to the demand. The customer will let you know what the demand is. We have enough. They develop great apps. I mean, really great apps. We can go and make greater apps, but it's the ability of the entity to respond to customer demand. Customers will tell you where they are, where they want to go, when they want to go. The issue is how do you provide the mobility system that goes and serves them? If you have to convince a driver to do that, then my goodness, it's like herding cats. I mean, it's just not easy. I mean, you have to deal with them. And when they're not employees, oh my goodness. I mean, that may be the fundamental expertise that Uber and Lyft have gotten, is how to handle gig workers and how to make them work when you want them to work without paying them. I mean, my goodness, but it doesn't scale. We started out this discussion about scaling. They serve less than 1% of the trips in their high point. 1%. What's 1%? It's a niche business. How do you get to 5? How do you get to 10? Okay. To get to 10%, do you have 10 times as many Uber drivers that want to drive for Uber at the times those people want to travel and do it for free?
Not unless you want to increase traffic.
Well, or I mean, if forget the increased traffic, you can't even. I don't think you can find the people who want. Right now, you've employed the people who are willing to earn the least. Mm-hmm. Any incremental one has to earn more. That means that's going to make it even tougher because the price is going to have to go up. So the whole dynamic of the fundamental business is it can't scale without driverless.
Which is why you've got to go driverless.
Which is why you have to go driverless. What does driverless do? It takes that labor cost the heck out of there. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the labor cost is substantial. It may not be as substantial as it could be with Uber or Lyft. Why? Because people are doing it for free. Why is the car so successful with 80-90% of the other trip? It's because we drive it for free. We give our time, our effort, our intelligence, our everything, and we don't charge, Tesla or Mercedes or GM, for it. We say, oh, we love to do it. Of course, they convince damn Madison Avenue and the madmen. Anyway, we always have fun, don't we?
This really has been terrific.
Hour. Wait a second. Wait, I sort of put you did put on the list here because we really, my God, this can go on all day. You had a story here about Tesla researchers published work on hybrid battery enabling all electric car range extender, and I just wanted to point out that this headline baffles me because it could be rewritten. This is the copywriter in me as higher power density battery in development.
It's a little confusing, that story. I agree.
Yeah, and it comes from an outlet whose name is Legion to me. I can't read anything published there because the intellectual firepower is not behind that place. But what I'm really saying is, if you're going to write a story about an increased, a superior power density electric car battery, which is it's news, then the real story around that is, why do people need electric vehicles with such big batteries? Most trips are not that long, and the cost of these batteries is very high. So what we really need isn't bigger batteries or even higher power density battery. We need batteries that are smaller, that are tailored to the average commute length, that use fewer precious metals, so we don't have to mine as much of it. And so over time, we're not recycling and throwing out these very expensive polluting battery packs, most of which people don't really need. And I wish that story was getting written.
But Alex, what about range anxiety? Oh my goodness, I'm going to have to go visit grandma sometime, and she lives, it's all about range anxiety. And the beauty about having this in driverless vehicles by a fleet operator, holy hell, there's no range anxiety because you know what it is. You can substitute, you manage it. No problem. Go ahead.
I have a question for you, Dr. Kornhauser. I know you're young at heart now, but at one point in your life, you were actually younger. And at that point, I don't know what year that was. Okay, for me, youth was sometime in the late 70s, early 80s. And my father had a Cadillac Fleetwood Brougham, a 77. And that thing, if you fill the fuel tank completely and you drove it reasonably, that the range of that vehicle might be 200 miles. So,
because yeah, right. It might have had a 400-gallon tank, but it required like 2 gallons per mile, right?
The 3-speed automatic had a fuel economy light in the dash. It was green or yellow. And it was anytime we were in motion, it was yellow.
Yeah.
So range anxiety, like safety, is this bizarre moving target. For the most of the century, the internal combustion car, I think the average family sedan in the 20th century might have gotten 250, 275 miles of range. And so electric vehicles are matching that or surpassing it. Now,
but Alex, you knew that there was going to be a gas station out there unless you were in Nevada, okay?
Yes.
And the problem with it, and one of the things that I think Tesla's really done a good job on, is putting charging stations throughout the country.
Agreed.
Okay, why did they do that? It's to deal with the range anxiety aspect of it. I mean, and that's to basically say, hey, in case you do want to go, we have these things. We'll even make it free or whatever. I don't even know what the pricing, but Tesla, when you look at some of the fundamental, really good decisions that they made, investing in those things, I mean, I haven't done the analytics on it, of course, but I suspect that, man.
I think that in fact, they could almost have looked at that as a marketing expense rather than infrastructure, because in terms of value there, it's off the chart.
Hey, look at what Autopilot's done for them.
Yeah.
I make the outlandish claim that, in fact, Autopilot sells more Teslas than the electric part. It's probably an outlandish claim and so on. But look, they've done. I never thought that they would do it that well. But look, you use it. Do you use yours?
99% of my road miles, I use Autopilot.
Wow.
I mean, I didn't think. I thought you were going to say 60.
No,
I mean, it's amazing.
But
how many of those miles do you not pay attention?
I'm paying attention 97% of them.
Okay.
To be clear, I would not.
Yeah, no, you've got to pay attention. You've got to pay. Any thought that you don't pay attention is like, might as well put a gun to your head.
Well, we did have one other Tesla story too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Throw that in. Elon Musk has yet another new baby, This time, literally.
Yeah, that he named A12 or something or other.
I can't pronounce the name. People have to look it up. But I guess we should congratulate him and his wife on their baby boy.
I would not buy another vehicle unless
it's
it
his
had
girlfriend, by the way.
That had very good radar cruise control and some at least nominal lane keeping system.
Yeah.
I mean, I've used the Porsche system. It's okay. Volvo, it's okay. Autopilot is better. I've used Cadillac Super Cruise has now had an upgrade. I haven't used that. My next car would have to have such a system because it's just for long distance driving. It's better. So.
Yeah, I have a Mercedes S-Class 2014. It's not very good in lane center. It does have it. It's, I think, terrible. The one thing that it does do, though, is it leads you into the curve. I mean, it really makes driving easier.
Yeah,
okay.
For sure.
You just rest your hand on there and it just makes it easier. And of course, the intelligent cruise control is absolutely necessary. Automated emergency braking that actually works, and that if there's a stationary object ahead of you, that it will brake for it. Absolutely necessary. I think in terms of total amenities for driving, and I've argued that with trucks it's even more important not to take the driver out of trucks, but just to allow the driver to have a little bit of an improvement in the quality of his or her life at work. I mean, imagine having to do this for 10 hours every day to feed your family. And if you lose it for just a little bit, you die. I mean, those guys and gals really need it in there. I know they think they're macho, but go ahead.
I think we need another episode.
We do.
We do. I mean, we can talk about this forever, right?
2/3 the way through our list, but we got to wrap this one up.
Yeah. Okay.
It's really great to have you with us, Alex, and we want to tell the audience that they can find you at noparkingpodcast.com. Great podcast. I enjoy listening to it.
Thanks so much, Fred. Thank you, Professor.
And thank you, Alex. And my wife, Elizabeth, sends her regards and says hello.
Send her my love and your family as well.
Thank you. You too.
That'll wrap up this edition. Thanks to our sponsor, the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF. The ticker symbol for the ETF is MOTO. More information available at motoetf.com. Also, we want to remind you that if you haven't checked it out already, please take a look at our new debate series at zoom-tank.com. Stay tuned for word on the next one as well. You can find us at smartdrivingcar.com, also on Anchor FM, Spotify, TuneIn, Apple, Google, Spreaker, SoundCloud, wherever you get podcasts, and you can get your smart speaker to play us too. You can find my tech reports at techstination.com. I'm Fred Fishkin along with Alan Kornhauser. Thank you for listening, and please stay safe.
Stay safe, healthy, and happy. And Alex, so great having you. Thank you.